Traders, how are you? With Marcello doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Escalation in Ukraine with more sanctions. Supposedly oil is going to go up now to $185. We have entire countries banning the export of their food, which is going to make the food crisis even worse. And we even have food processors in the US. They are literally just mysteriously being lit on fire. And in other good news, Elon Musk just gave it to Bill Gates. Way to go, Bill. Way to go, Elon Musk. We had huge down moves in the stock market. And when I say huge, I mean huge. The US markets were overall down. Canada also went down by over 3%, mainly due to the fact that the Federal Reserve directors, or the chair, I should say, said that they're going to pursue aggressively to curb inflation. What does that mean? They're going to raise interest rates a lot faster, supposedly. And then what happens to investor behavior? They pull their money out of stocks because that's quote unquote a risky investment because it's not a fixed interest rate like government bonds, for example, right? And so then they move the money out and then they put it into things like treasury bonds and the dollar and things like that, where governments, quote unquote, the US can give you a fixed interest rate, which is quote unquote secure. So that's basically why we had a little bit of a bloodbath this whole week. Friday had the worst day for the Dow since 2020. Overseas market news, the European markets are mostly lower as well. Russia went down by over 8%, which isn't surprising. Latin America also mostly negative as well. Africa and the Middle East, Nigeria was the biggest winner out of a bunch of losers. They went up 1.89%. And then the far East, markets mostly mixed, but the biggest loser there was the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. A lot of news in Bitcoin and crypto, the crypto space. Commerzbank, which is the second largest bank in Germany. Remember, Germany is the fourth largest economy in the world. Commerzbank is also the 25th largest bank in all of Europe. They are going to target institutional investors, as I just applied for a crypto license. So this kind of has some pretty significant, I always do the videos in Spanish first and I lose my it's funny how the mind works. After you do Spanish for so long, I'm down here in Colombia, then your mind grasps for the English words. But this is kind of getting the crypto space into a much more mass market dynamic, because at the end of the day, most people still don't buy cryptos. And obviously, if a bank like Commerzbank, which has a lot of institutional clout, gets into the game, it's probably going to open up the doors for a lot more people. Coinbase also launched an NFT marketplace. It's currently in beta and anybody can go in and check it out. Coinbase, remember, is the largest crypto exchange in North America, in the United States. U.S. Secret Service is cracking down on illicit digital currency transactions. They said that they've had 254 cases since 2015 and some ongoing out of those 254. And they have seized over $102 million from supposed criminals with connection to fraud. Overall for the week, Bitcoin is down 2.15%, just over 40,000 excuse me, I got the hiccups. 40,457 with 20 cents. And in the commodity space, we'll start off with the food crisis. Turkey now is banning food exports. I tried to find the percentage of global GDP of what Turkey food exports were. And what I was able to find, it's 3.3% overall of global GDP. So not only that, remember that we also had people like Hungary that were banning things like wheat exports. So we're starting to have one country after the other start to put these borders on their food exports. And it's pretty serious because we in the United States are a lot better off because obviously we have a lot of food to grow, but there's another crisis that's happening where a lot of the food processing plants, more than a dozen, have been shut down. 2 of them have been hit by a plane. What are the odds of that? And the rest are mysteriously catching fire, quote unquote, mysteriously. Now, I'll go on to say that, remember, I always tell you guys that don't pay attention to what they say, pay attention to what they do. And I uploaded a video, I believe it was about a year ago, about why all the rich people were selling all of their stocks. For example, like Bill Gates, who's become the biggest farm owner in the United States. Now, why, for example, would Bill Gates sell all of his stocks and then start buying things like farmland? Mysteriously catching fire, the food processing plants, huh? Maybe the preppers were right. 30 million chickens and turkeys have recently been killed due to a supposed epidemic of avian flu. They're using the same PCR test that they used for the pandemic in 2020, so you know what that means. And meanwhile, China is also continuing to buy up U.S. farmland. At the last count, it was over 200,000 acres. So obviously, because of all this, a lot of people are saying, as we started talking about here on the recap, starting in 2020, the food crisis, every week, go to Costco, go to, what's the other one, Sam's Club, buy some canned tuna, buy some peanut butter, right? Some canned roast beef, canned ham. Have about a month or two worth of food, because I think this is going to pop off very seriously, probably by the end of this year, most likely 2023. Azure Standard, which is the nation's largest independent food distributor, also had a mysterious fire overnight. In their headquarters. Keeps happening to our food and supply chains. And Indonesia is banning edible oil exports. If you guys didn't know, the palm oil that creates things like vegetable oil worldwide, they're the biggest producer and exporter of this oil, and they are not going to be allowed to export it anymore. So you see how it's kind of a combination of everything just hitting all at once. And in my view, I think they're doing it on purpose. But that's just my conspiracy Marcello. Other than that, U.S. crude went down 4.78%. Brent, which is international, went down 4.73%. The combination of an increase of interest rates, markets going down, and the top of the IMF, International Monetary Fund, not debating, but predicting that we're going to have a much steeper drop in expected global expansion. So the global economy essentially is going to be a lot slower than what, quote unquote, they expected it to be. Obviously, due to the war, now due to the situation with the inflation and the interest rates. And so obviously, when the interest rates, or when the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank in the United States, states they're going to aggressively increase interest rates, which is a negative effect on the economy and the stock market. And on top of that, we have a situation where the inflation is out of control. And then on top of that, we have things like the quarantine in China, the biggest city, Shanghai, for example, just shutting down the entire city, second largest economy in the world. Yeah, we're probably not going to grow as much anymore. Beijing rep to the EU is declaring, a representative of the EU is stating after the French elections this weekend that they're going to put a full embargo on Russian oil this weekend. So it'll be most likely on Monday. And if that happens, Chase, which is the biggest bank in the United States, is saying that oil can reach $185 a barrel. Boy, I'm sure glad this president doesn't say mean tweets. U.S. natural gas surged highest level in over 13 years on Monday. Obviously, again, they're blaming Ukraine in the war due to the energy crunch. And corn, which is just one of the major agricultural commodities in the world, just hit its highest level, $8 per bushel, since September 2012. Precious metals collapsed. Gold went down 2.16% in 1933. Silver went down 6.35% to 24.23. That's because of the interest rate. Right. Remember, I just mentioned to you the central bank in the United States is threatening to be aggressive with the interest rates to curb inflation. Obviously, when the interest rates go up, more people demand the dollar. The value of the dollar goes up, and any commodity based on the dollar, which is oil, gold, silver, among others, they go down in price. Financial and banking news. The like button here on YouTube, it has not gone up in price, so make sure you leave your like before we start raising it. Inflation hasn't hit the like button just yet, so go ahead and smash it. For you guys that are listening on Spotify or the podcast, if you want to find me on YouTube, just look up Marcello Arrambide Trader or Marcello Arrambide Recap. You should be able to come it up. And for those of you guys that don't watch me on YouTube or want to listen to the podcast, just look for Day Trading Academy anywhere you listen to your podcast and it should come up. Financial and banking news. The ECB is threatening to tighten also as well, faster, a lot faster than expected, because 7 EU countries are hit by 10 to 16% inflation. There's 4 over 9%. Spain, for example, is at 8.5. Remember that these government numbers are not accurate when it comes to inflation. You probably, of all people, know because you go to the store and you see how things are going up 10, 20, 30%, right? And not only that, the shrinkflation, where you buy the same amount or it goes up maybe a little bit in price, but you get less items, or it's smaller packaging, for example, because they're giving you less product. So they're expecting to go ahead and increase interest rates a lot faster. The dollar rose to a 2-year high on Monday, in line with higher U.S. Treasury yields. The benchmark 10-year Treasury yield touched a 3-year high of 2.88%, as investors are bracing for a 0.5 percentage point hike from the Fed, in addition to the dollar hitting a 20-year peak against the Japanese yen. The Japanese yen, remember, the economy is the 3rd largest in the world. U.S. banks are not, I would say, in a bit of trouble, but they have $14.7 billion in outstanding loans with the Russian banks, according to the Bank for International Settlements. If you don't know who the Bank of International Settlements is, it's basically the central banks of all the central banks in the world. And so a lot of the U.S. banks are stating that they're going to have a sharp decline in earnings from a year ago. Their profit is going to go down probably by a third, because they're going to have to write off a lot of these loans, because now Russia, especially the banks and anybody doing business there, can't get dollars to pay off the loans because of the sanctions. Political news. The Florida Senate, in their fight against Disney, voted to remove Disney's tax privilege and self-governing power and special exceptions. Basically, it was a bunch of special districts that were set up before 1967, where they passed a law. And it passed 23-16 in the House, 68-38 in the Senate. And I think they went 4 or 5 days before they signed this law. I've never seen something move so quick. But now Disney is going to have to pay $200 million more in taxes. And they're going to have to go through a lot more bureaucracy to be able to build the buildings in all their parks, for example. French voters are still expected, supposedly, to hand Emmanuel Macron 5 more years in office on Sunday, even though the polls are saying it's going to be a lot tighter race than expected. And in economic news, Goldman Sachs, which is the most important financial institution in the United States, is saying that there's a 35% chance of a U.S. recession over the next 2 years. Remember that these bureaucrats, like the Ben Bernanke and Yellen, said that there wasn't going to be a recession right before the financial crisis in 2009. So as I told you guys before, don't listen to what they say, pay attention to what they do. And if Bill Gates is selling all his stocks and buying farmland, that I think tells you everything, my friends. There's been a large gap between jobs and workers. And so there's a bunch of jobs available and there's not enough workers. So what happens? A lot of companies have to pay a lot more to get people in the door, right? So with the elevated cost of labor, because of this gap, that is continuing to help the inflation or the rising prices. The only way out of this historically is essentially if we have an economic contraction like a recession. So that means basically that inflation is probably not going to head down anytime soon, even though we're at a 4-decade high. The IMF is also stating that we're going to, the GDP in Russia is going to fall by 8.5. Meanwhile, Ukraine's economy is going to fall by over 35%. There's an estimated value of $60 billion that are going to be needed to be able to recover the Ukrainian economy. So obviously we should just give them that money instead of investing in our own infrastructure that's falling apart in the US. In corporate news, shares of Twitter exploded 7.48% to $48.45 after investors are betting that the stock price is going to continue to increase as Elon Musk supposedly is looking for debt financing to take over the company. He also said that if he took control of Twitter, that all the people on the board would not get paid for what they do, which means a savings of over $3 million. So we'll see if he can do that. And the hilarious back and forth between Elon Musk and Bill Gates. Bill Gates supposedly sent Elon Musk a tweet saying, hey, let's work on some philanthropy. I know I'm saying it wrong, but you guys get me, right? Let's do some philanthropic stuff with all the billions that we got. And then Elon Musk asked him, well, are you still shorting Tesla, the stock? And Bill Gates says, yeah, I'm still shorting it. And he says, well, I'm not going to be able to do that because you're literally going against the company that has done one of the most amount of work to be able to help with climate change, which is why you want to do this philanthropy in the first place. And then he uploaded a video of this meme, which is hilarious. And you guys can see that it's just hilarious. You guys will probably see it there in the video. Elon Musk is the best. Other than that, Disney fell 2.07% as it continues to be drawn into the political fray. Probably not the best thing for shareholders, right? Their value of the stock has gone down, I think, $50 billion, and it's gone down 15% so far in 2022. And shares of the pharmaceutical and vaccine company Moderna fell almost 6.5% after they had disappointing results for side effects for the flu vaccine. The shares are down close to 40% for 2022. And shares of Meta, which is Facebook, fell quite a bit after allegations against the COO Sheryl Sandberg reignited worries about senior management ethics at the company and the competition that TikTok is placing on them. Obviously now TikTok, everybody knows it's a formidable competitor to Facebook. And Netflix, their shares plunged over 35%. They lost $42 billion in value after losing another 2 million subscribers in the current quarter, the first time that they had a drop in subscribers in their history. And Amazon and technology, according the mark of the beast is here. They are testing a palm scanning payment system, which is being tested at a Whole Foods in Austin. Basically, you just, put your palm. Not that they could just turn off your money when we have government coin and turn off your cars when they're all electric and just decide to not allow you to go into a food market and buy your food because you don't have opposing views. No, they wouldn't do that, right? Like they did recently during the pandemic. Top Honda executive is planning to build 2 million electric vehicles annually by 2030, according to them. And they're using 3 new dedicated platforms, including one that's jointly being built with GM. Thursday, SpaceX signed their first deal with an air carrier to provide their satellite internet. It's a company called JSX, a semi-private charter company. And obviously, SpaceX is moving into a very, very highly contested market, which is a satellite internet company. I believe there's some rumors that they may be doing a deal with Delta as well. And in investment news, Monday, I mentioned that about them not paying the board members if he takes over Twitter. And in international events, Russia informs its citizens to prepare for a NATO retaliatory nuclear attack. Now, this is weird because the only way that the U.S. would retaliate is if they struck first. So why would they be warning their citizens of a retaliatory attack? You see where this is going, right? And a U.S. Georgia, and I'm sure all you guys have heard about this, but the mask mandate on planes, buses, and trains are no longer being enforced due to the fact that the mask mandate has been struck down by a Florida judge nominated by President Trump. The TSA is also no longer going to enforce the face mask, but on Wednesday, the Department of Justice stated that they're going to appeal the decision due to the fact that it's still necessary for public health. Blackouts in India. Remember about 2 weeks we talked about the potential for this due to the fact that they're having a record hot month, the record hottest month on record, hottest March on record, and they have an acute coal shortage as well, so they're not able to find the coal because of the supply problems, but at the same time, they don't have enough capacity to be able to ramp up the energy. And Biden has pledged more heavy artillery, ammo, and drones in Ukraine for a new $800 million weapons package. So going back to the inflation, remember the workers and the jobs available? Well, part of the reason why we have this inflation problem is because we literally printed all this money. I think 40% of the money that's in circulation right now was not in circulation before the pandemic, which keeps going up every day. So now we have another stimulus basically for Ukraine, and that's going to continue to make inflation worse. And other than that, in unusual facts, Elon Musk, who runs a bajillion companies, including Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, the Boring Company, among others, Starlink, which is part of SpaceX. They reportedly he's worth about $255 billion and he has no home. When he's traveling, he stays at various friends and associate houses, and he's known for not having any lavish luxuries like fleets of transportation and yachts and things like that. The only concession is that he has a private jet, which he says he needs to be able to get all his business interests done on time. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Remember the like button, since it's not going up in price. Go ahead and leave your like. Hopefully you're buying some food to prepare for the coming apocalypse, because the preppers were right.